2024 Community Finance Committee meeting to order. A roll call, please.
Mr. Arnaz,
Here.
Mr. Lisbon,
Here.
Mr. Kowski, Mr. Davis, Dr. Figueroa. Here. Ms. Guerrero. Here. Mr. Arnhoff.
Here.
Dr. Johnson, Mr. Kohler.
Here.
Mr. Miller,
Here.
Dr. Odell. Here.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or corrections to the minutes from our last meeting on December 12th, 2023? If not, I'd like a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. At this point, I don't see any members of the public present for comment. Anyone on Zoom?
No.
On Zoom. Next item is election of committee officers. So we have a chair and co-chair roles. So I'll start with the chair role. It's been my pleasure to serve for 2 years as the committee chair, and nominations are now in order for the office of chair for a 1-year term. And I call for any nominations for committee chair.
I'll nominate Greg.
You go. Greg Kolar is nominated. Any further nominations for committee chair? Hearing no further nominations, I'll declare the nominations for chair closed. Greg Kolar being the only candidate nominated for the office of committee chair, I hereby declare him elected by acclamation and direct the board clerk to so record in the minutes.
So noted.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Lisa, for preparing the script for me. Nominations are now in order for the office of committee co-chair for a 1-year term. Thank you, Greg, for serving that role for the last 2 years. I call nominations for co-chair. I would like to nominate Kathleen Odell for co-chair. Any other nominations? Hearing no further nominations, I'll declare the nominations for co-chair closed. Kathleen Odell being the only candidate nominated for the office of committee co-chair, I hereby declare her elected by acclamation and direct the board clerk to so record in the minutes.
So noted.
Switch her over to the meeting seats, Greg. Or does that happen at the next meeting? We've never had a transfer of power in a short time.
Beginning at the next COC meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you, Carol. I think that's the time. We got some time upstairs. Okay, so then moving on to our discussion items. First one up is the audit and comprehensive annual financial report. Tony, you want to any instructions?
So recently, when I first came on board here, the district had just completed an RFP for a new firm to complete our annual audit. We have Mr. Shaw here from Lauterbach and Amon, very reputable school district finance auditing firm. And this is the first year now they've completed our audit. He worked pretty extensively with Brian to get all the documents in order and get it complete. And now we will turn it over and hear that we're in good shape still. So.
All right, well, thank you. I first would like to thank Tony, Cindy, Brian, and the entire team for making this a successful audit, first audit year. Without you guys, it's not possible, so thank you. I'm next going to go through the annual financial report, which is the thicker of the package you received. And as I say page numbers, it's going to be the actual page number. So if you're following along via PDF, it's going to be at the bottom of the page.
Now I'm going to interrupt you, but if I can just acknowledge Mr. Davis coming in.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
That's all right, no worries. And if you turn to page 9, you'll find the Certificate of Excellence Award. This award was provided for the 2022 audit year. We have applied for and expect to receive the same award for 2023. So congratulations on receiving that award. If you turn about 3 more pages, you'll find our Lauterbach and Amon letterhead. This is our independent audit report in which we provide a clean, unmodified opinion. That's the highest opinion you can receive. Basically states that we found no issues with internal controls or the numbers as they're presented. The next section is the major discussion and analysis. And this really provides a summary of how the year performed in narrative form. So if you have questions on fluctuations from year to year, or what the numbers truly mean, this is where you want to go find those answers. Your individual financial statements will begin on page 29. And it starts off with your balance sheet. Towards the bottom on the far right column, you'll notice that the total ending fund balance for the district as a whole was at $81 million. 52% or $42 million is related to your general fund, which is your main operating fund, and it's made up of your education and student activity funds. To see how these funds perform in the current year, we can skip ahead to what would be your income statement, which is on page 31. About 3/4 of the way down the page, you'll see that the general fund had an operating increase of about $3.7 million. This is primarily due to your revenues coming in higher than anticipated and your expenditures being below budget in the current year. This was offset by a transfer out to your capital projects fund of about $7.5 million. So your general fund was left with a deficit of $3.7 million in the current year. The notes of financial statement will begin on page 36. And the notes really provide further details into how we came up with the figures that we did with supporting schedules. Within there, you're going to find your long-term debt and your capital asset schedules. I'm not going to go through all the notes with you tonight, so I'll have you skip ahead all the way to page 86. Page 86 is the start of your budgetary information. So if you want to see how a specific fund performed based on what's budgeted, this is where you want to go to see those comparisons. Does anyone have any questions on the financial statements before moving on? Okay. If not, we did also provide a second document called the management letter. We had 5 current year recommendations. 2 of them are related to gassing pronouncements that are being implemented in the next 2 years. That we'll be working with Tony and Brian and the team on implementing. We also had 2 best practice policies that we'd be happy to share templates for implementing next year. And then the last remaining one is financial in nature. So we'll look into implementation for next year for those deficit fund balances. So overall, again, it was a very good year, and Tony and Brian made it as smooth as possible on us, so much appreciated. Anyone have any questions?
Thanks, Don. Tony or Brian, anything you want to add to any of the audits pieces?
Nothing to add on my end, other than I'll just kind of echo much of what Don said. You know, for a first year working with a new audit firm, there's always, you know, a getting to know you type process. So some additional. Every auditor looks at some slightly different things, so you know we get used to preparing things in a certain format. You know, they have certain things they like to look at, but communication between the 2 sides, I felt like was very, you know, clear and open at all times. And you know, we were on the audit schedule a little bit later this year than normal from having gone out to the RFP. So that's why we're kind of looking at this in March, whereas I think in past years it's been more like a December, January type schedule. But that's the reason for why it's a little bit later this year. But yeah, I couldn't have been happier with how things went with working with a new audit firm this year, and wanted to thank Don and his team for their professionalism as well.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Brian. Any questions from committee about any pieces of the audit? Well, we got auditor.
I don't have any questions on that. Just how often are we changing auditors?
We, and I'm speaking for a little bit of, outside looking in, but, I believe it's our board policy every 5 years. We, at least consider whether it's time to look for any kind of service provider. That said, Brian, I don't know if you happen to know off the top of your head, but we were with, Baker Tilly prior to, this change. And they were here for a number of years. Do you happen to know how long it was, Brian?
I don't know exactly how many, but I'm pretty sure it was at least 10 years.
Yeah,
Their predecessor firms were here 25 years ago, because I did the audit back then. I don't know if there was a time that you went away from them, but they had a long history here, yeah.
And I think kind of as an industry, there were some larger firms that saw their not as many new auditors coming in and were having a hard time completing the audits that they were completing. So when I was hired on, Cindy had reached out and said, you know, I'm thinking of making a change where every year we seem to be a little bit later in the game. And she completed the RP, and knowing the work that Lauterbach and Neiman do and the quality of work they do, they also audit the financials for the Illinois Association of School Business Officials, and think very highly of the firm. So I was very happy to hear that they were selected, and feel that we're in really, really good hands. We've got a good partner here, but we will, you know, continue to follow our board policy in terms of guidelines, but you know, there doesn't necessarily have to be a change, just that, you know, we have to review if we'd like to make the change or not.
Can I just follow up on that? When did we run that RFP and make this award?
Brian, I don't know if you remember that, but I
want to say it was June.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's an indictment of my memory, because I should have remembered that. And I apologize. So, and can you tell me your name?
Yeah, Don Shaw, one of the principals at.
How big is your firm?
We have about 250 to between 200 and 250 employees.
Okay.
And then we also audit around about 50 school districts as well.
Okay. And do you know how long this agreement is? Since
I would have to go back. Usually it's like a 3 or 5 years, kind of the common agreements. I would have to go back and look. I don't have that.
Okay.
It's a 3-year contract.
3 year.
Oh, okay, great.
And since the RFP came a little later in the game, it was hard for us to build into our schedule at that point. But now that we're have a partnership, the hope is to move you guys up in the schedule so that we can finalize a little earlier.
Okay, thank you.
Without moving Schaumburg back in the schedule.
Yes.
We also went through an RFP, you made a change, a lot about your name and history this year.
It'll not hurt you, don't worry.
Anything else for Don? Thanks so much.
All right, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Take care.
Our next discussion topic is evidence-based funding and staffing.
Sure. In the packet, you'll see the FY24 gap analysis spreadsheet here. Annually, the district completes the adequacy target gap analysis calculator that's provided by the Illinois State Board of Education. And it gives a look in terms of how the district compares to ISB recommended staffing levels for adequacy. Some easy way to look at it would be that the shaded areas, the targets in gray, and everything to the left comes pre-populated, specific to our district from the state. And then everything in the yellow is what we fill in. It may seem that we have far more employees in this report than we actually do. That is due to the way that form calculates substitute teachers. So that will throw the total number off. But really what it attempts to show is areas that we may be either a little heavy or a little bit light in staffing. You can see, for example, for most of the areas we're right around where we should be. We have a couple areas that we are a little bit heavier in. But what I found is that when we look at our supervisory aides, for example, we have a large security team here that gets calculated in. But our building's a little bit unique just in terms of size and the number of students compared to many other high schools in the state. So that increases that number up. We also keep our building open for more hours and more days than the average high school. So we require a little bit larger staff there. School site staff, where some districts may house a like have a district technology team that is housed at like a centralized office off-site. Because we're all in the same building, our entire tech department gets put into that. So it inflates the numbers a little bit, but it's always a good tool to have as we start to look to staffing for the next year and see you know how this aligns with our staffing requests. Those were brought forward at the prior, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So a question about the librarians and why those are staffed so low relative to the targets.
Brian, I'm not sure if you have thoughts on the librarians. To me, I think this is another instance where when we compare kind of the size of our school, it throws the numbers a little bit. We have you know, when you go into our student resource center, we have additional staff that fall into other categories that work out of there. So it kind of makes this sheet look a little bit more off than it should be.
Yeah, I think you hit on it, Tony. It's and part of your commentary earlier applies as well. You know, some of it is the challenge with the document itself is that the state's trying to come up with a standardized you know template that all school districts can use. And there's so many unique factors between the size of the building, the specific population needs of your students, things of that nature that just kind of make it hard to make everything work as well as it should within a template like this. So I think one of the big contributing factors on the librarians line is us being a single site school district. Alternatively, you might have another high school district with a similar enrollment with 2 or 3 buildings, and then they would have a library within each one. So this centralized nature of our school district kind of shrinks down some of those specialty positions in terms of our need for staffing.
Yeah, and I think a good way to look at it or to think about it, and it's where there's definite pros to using this sheet, but there's also some drawbacks of kind of a one-size-fits-all approach. You would be hard pressed to find many high schools, if any, in the state that staff 6 librarians or 5.5 librarians in one building. Just because of the I want to say the layout, but just schematically how it would all come together. 2 librarians, 2 aides is a pretty common setup. It's what I've seen in my prior districts as well. But again, we have in that library space, education components that go on. So we have teaching staff in there. We've got our student help desk for technology is in there. So it is a little bit more appropriately staffed than it appears, but from a sheer librarian standpoint, it gets thrown.
Dr. Firenze, were you going to say something?
What's in the school site staff section? And why is that so high?
So for the school site staff, that includes for us, what I think inflates that a little bit is we have all of our technology staff is on site and our student help desk is on site. We handle repairs to like the student computers in-house compared to sending them out to be repaired. for this calculation for another district of that technology teams, they had a technology warehouse where they were not within the building. They wouldn't be calculated in. So we pull in a greater number because we're all located within the school itself.
There's probably some other sort of just more district level
Yes.
positions that fall in, like a registrar or things like that.
Yeah,
Wouldn't be school site if you had more than one site probably.
yeah.
Any other questions on the first page?
Second page, when we go through it, you'll see that gifted, we do not have a gifted program here, so that is why that spend is at 0. This more looks at the per student investments and how the money is allocated. This can change a little bit more significantly year to year based on the individual budgets. Being 1-to-1, you can see invest pretty heavily in technology for the students. We do a lot of professional development within the district itself, so that's a little bit heavier. The student activities line is one that came in under, as well as maintenance and operations. 2 areas that, as we look and investigate more, we're learning a little bit more about, but still in that stage of, okay, are there areas that we can increase spending, or are we really being efficient with our dollars, and is anything lacking even though we're not at that dollar per dollar level. Then the one that seems to throw it a lot is employee benefits at 30% of salaries is how they budget it. I think that's just reflective of really what the market is at with benefits. I personally am not a fan of the 30% factor. I think it just doesn't reflect what our market is for providing benefits.
I did have a question on that one.
Sure.
That was one I had circled looking at this. More stepping away from the EBF stuff, but more generally, would like to hear sort of what the state of benefits, i.e. health insurance costs is for the district. I had noticed in the management letter for the audit, they talked about a deficit balance in your self-insurance fund for that. So just be curious kind of what the district is doing to try to manage those costs, those increases.
We've had a particularly on the health insurance line, that has been a big topic of conversation, particularly in the insurance committee the last couple of years. Claims have been higher than anticipated for a good 3 years running now. So it's been kind of a catch-up game in terms of what to set the premium rates at, and then what alternative changes can be made to the actual benefit offerings, and what other types of insurance avenues can we look at to kind of help reduce costs. So in each of the last 2 budget years, I know it's been challenging even to budget for, because not only are we trying to figure out how much premiums should increase by to help with that reserve fund, but when you're making changes to plans, you don't exactly know how that's going to affect your actual claims number until you start getting some history of the actual data. So I think we've definitely made improvements. Everything that I hear coming out of that committee is that if we hadn't made changes to insurance plans and benefits, we'd be in a worse shape than we are. So there's positive steps, but I think the changes that have been made to some of the actual insurance plans have not quite gotten us as far as the committee was hoping it would in the last 2 years. So, year over year, we're meeting several times with our consulting firm for insurance to kind of review claims history, what kind of other options are available to help decrease costs in that area.
I think a couple of things too we can point to is our renewal for health insurance this year. We had pretty low premium PPO plan or low deductible PPO plan. And then what was called, I believe, the high PPO plan, which still was a pretty modest deductible. We were able to eliminate the lowest PPO plan and really make the high plan the low plan, because it was it's still a very attractive benefit offering. We then, to replace a number of offerings, offered a high deductible PPO. And saw significant enrollment in that in year one, and then also saw premium increase more in line with what we were being recommended by our broker. And I think that those two steps are going to go a long way towards stabilizing the balances that we have moving forward.
It's my district's been struggling with the same thing, so I'm excited to hear some of the progress you've made. We've been hamstrung by our collective bargaining agreements and can't move a lot of levers.
That I think it's one of those types of situations where you can kick the can for a few years down the road, and it's not uncommon, and then all of a sudden you're kind of faced with the situation of, okay, either if we kick the can more, we're going to see this deficit get unbearable, or we can make some changes and still have a solid offering, an attractive offering to the employees, but do so in a manner that's more fiscally sustainable.
Yeah.
That's what we're able to do this year.
Is the 30% the average for the state then? 30% of salaries, that's the average for the state?
I believe that when EBF was created, that was the case. I wonder if they did those calculations now, if you would end up with a higher
You should know
percentage.
that, I know for reference, what is the OPR, what is that one district's average?
You know, I don't have that percentage off the top of my head. Brian, do you happen to know that?
Sorry, I didn't hear that question.
The percent of salaries for our school district,
In terms of,
EBF is benefits is 30% of salaries, and what yours is.
yeah, I'm not sure on that exact percentage either.
What I can do is I will check on that so I can get the exact numbers, and then I will email out our committee tomorrow.
So there is a committee at the state level that reviews all of this on a regular basis and makes adjustments, but that's one that I don't think has changed since, I think it was 2018, was the first year of the DBL.
so what do we do with this data then? What are the next?
This is presented to our board and then brought for information here to go along with staffing recommendations. One other area that we use this to look at is from the equity lens, and you know, are we being equitable and putting resources in areas where they're needed? You know, and one area that I'm happy to talk about is in work with Dr. Latanya Applewhite here at the district. We've enrolled with our budgeting documents that go out to each department. It kind of using this as our baseline and then building up. We've also included now an equity-based budgeting tool that forces each department to just ask themselves some tough questions. You know, have I looked at my student data, and are my students of different backgrounds performing at different levels? If I allocate certain amount of dollars here, do I have students then that lose by doing so? And you know, just look at the data and think about it in ways that maybe hasn't been done prior to this. And then you know, another area that I think this shows, and I believe it was Mr. Kopsky said it during the meeting, was it's you know, you can look at it in two ways and say, okay, are we a district that pays well, or are we a district that's severely overstaffed? And I think what we saw from the data is, all things considered, it's a district that tends to pay its employees well, but isn't bloated when it comes to staffing. We're appropriately staffed, and it's interesting because this year then the recommendation to the board was for a total of a 1.3% increase when all the different positions were added together, mainly in the areas of EL support and special education. And then adding a psychologist role that would support a growing 504 plan population. Those have grown from 134 504s in FY15 to 404 in FY24. So we've seen just the number of 504 plans in the district explode, and this psychologist position would have a heavy focus in that area to make sure those students are receiving support as well.
Follow up, or we still gotta go through page three.
Yeah, was there any more you wanna add?
Yeah,
Tony?
so one other area just as we, sorry.
I'm just gonna expound something you said to Petra, so this model is very easy here, because it's one school. You get into more granular detail that each, like, so you have K through 8 here, there's 8 schools, so each school has their own EVF model like this, so you can compare school to schools, so you get a lot of different data.
Yeah.
And a lot more comparison of like stuff, so.
Yeah.
That really makes a difference.
It's good to know, thank you.
Okay, so maybe that's a good point to ask. Was this committee provided your most excellent evidence-based funding presentation?
You know, we didn't do the full presentation as I was thinking about it, because that was really built around the work Dr. Applewhite was doing. But I'd be happy to link that in for anybody that didn't have it. Because I think the other thing that really we were able to show through that presentation was that we, as a district, there's some analytics that I like to take out of Forecast 5 that look at what do we spend per student compared to our comparative districts, and then how do we perform. And really there's a quadrant everybody'd like to be in that really shows where when you're not spending above the average of your peer group, but you're outperforming them at a level in math, science, and ELA, we are below average, just slightly below average in spending to our peers, but significantly outperforming the vast majority of the group. So I'll be happy to link that and share it in.
So, if we just take a step back for a second, does everybody here have committed to memory the 7 peer districts of OPRF?
No.
I remember them.
So,
I could try to name them if you want the game, but.
yeah, backwards, please. No, so that's really more of a rhetorical question, because I think for us to be most effective as a community finance committee, I think we should have at the ready always how we're performing against our peer districts. And the reason I credited Tony by describing this report as super most excellent is because he goes through and shows how we are performing on an expenditure per pupil basis against the 7 peer districts, including how we're performing academically. So in other words, are we spending a certain amount and seeing commensurate academic outcome? So I think this is critical because I don't think anyone here should take administration's word for it when they say we're not spending, we're not over bloated or we're not understaffed and so forth, because the data is all here. And I would suggest, and if I caught this sooner, and I apologize, when I look at this agenda item, EDF, Tony, this is great work on your part. I think you should go ahead and just send this stuff out right away to get this committee up to speed. Because to me, peer districts are a gold standard because, as we just heard, at a very state level, 800 some districts, you're boiling an ocean here. And it's not all that relevant as a comparison, as opposed to the 7 districts who are comparable in size, subject to PTEL, high school districts only, and within the metro Chicago area, so you're kind of at an apples to apples place when it comes to things like cost of benefits. So I'll get off my soapbox, and I think the team would really benefit from seeing these materials from the February 8th meeting, and then I'll let you go on to page 3 unless Steve wants to say something.
Sorry, I was gonna say one more thing. I'm a little bit concerned about the maintenance and operations and spending less, because we are in a building that is very old. And I just question, are we maintaining our building as best as we can? For example, when it comes to like maintaining the bathrooms, right, and things like that. I mean, that's very questionable, for me, and I think that we should take this data and, really, ponder that question, right? Could we be doing more? To service those areas that are used by all of the students and the staff, et cetera, et cetera.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, or some of you know better. I think this operations and maintenance line excludes capital spend. I think this is really just
Repairing and.
custodial maintenance, utility type costs, and capital is separate from it.
Yes.
So,
Yeah,
So,
yeah, the other thing that's a little bit, I don't wanna say wonky about the report, but it attempts to take some data from the prior audited year and compare it against data for the current budgeted year. So you don't always get a true kind of apples to apples comparison in terms of what we're planning to spend. I think because I did notice in prior years' reports, there wasn't a significant drop, but the district was also in the middle of a large capital project with the track and field project, getting ready for project 2. And I believe that had to do with had something to do with the amount of money that was budgeted during the prior fiscal year.
I just wanted to circle back to Graham's comment a little bit. I look forward to seeing what you put together, Tony. I just saw it on your screen.
Yeah,
That's one of my favorite charts from the forecast file.
Yeah.
I presented it to my budget committee last fall and it does an awesome job of telling your story if you're outperforming and underspending, that's the quadrant you want to be in.
Yeah.
Look forward to seeing it.
I have a question about student activities.
sure.
These are talking about sports teams or all activities, students as far as clubs and things like that?
This would be athletics, clubs, everything.
Okay, so I serve on this township committee and the Oak Park Foundation and, they give out money and stuff. And there's a lot of Oak Park clubs, OPR clubs that come and ask for money, especially intramurals, because you guys have like a baseline of everybody gets a certain something or whatever. So with intramurals, I think, you guys did women's flag football this year, but not very many sports make it to the big time here at OPRF. So I think this number kind of reflects that if you guys took more things from intramurals and made it more of the mainline sports. I just use the example I use every year, bowling, but if you guys could just start like a bowling team or something, because you have the intramurals. So, flag football kind of came past everything and it's a state sport now. So what keeps everything else in intramurals, I guess, is there, apparently here we're not spending enough money, so is there like some type of rule or something, but.
I've only experienced this one time so far since I've been in the district, but annually there'll be a review of the athletic programs and other extracurricular activities that are offered by the district, and recommendations will be brought in terms of, are we seeing enrollment enough to make something a club? Do we have clubs that we don't have enrollment in? Have we been able to hire positions or coaches or unable to find them? I believe, but right now, as you said, flag football for women is going through the process to be recognized then as an IHSA sport by the district. So there is a formalized process here that everything goes through. But in terms of why one and not another, I don't feel confident in being able to provide that answer right now.
Okay, I'm not really asking for an answer. It's more about investigative point to make for the most part, because bowling, I bring up bowling again as an example. Intramurals, no matches. They can qualify for regionals. Once they qualify for regionals and sectionals, the school comes in, takes over. Okay, they represent the school, get uniforms, let the coach drive the bus. So then they're kind of a team. They show up at the regionals as OPRF, but
during the whole bowling season, they don't go to LT, they don't go to Morton, they don't participate in any of the matches. They're just kind of in a circle, hanging out, bowling, and, you know. It's just a question.
It's a great point.
It's interesting to me also, because, you know, bowling is an IHSA sport.
Yes.
But you're saying it normally operates just at the intramural level unless and until we get good enough to.
Well, I think that's with all intramural sports, if you're able to make it to a regional, then the school takes over because they have to. And then you're part of the school and you're, you know, at the regionals and at the section. So really, probably more of our intramural sports can't participate in the playoffs. They just don't do it. I mean, a couple years ago, with the boys in bowling and girls too, I kind of called and begged the school to kind of look into this, and I called IHSA myself. That's how I know. But I'm sure it's the same deal for any sport that's recognized by the state. So I mean, I'm just wondering what makes you get to the big time of OPR varsity sport versus intramural.
Yeah.
Then we have this money left over.
I don't want to sidetrack us, but if you look at our portfolio of sports, there's a wide variance in terms of how thriving the different programs are.
Oh, I agree.
Which sort of, you know, each one of them probably has a story behind it. But I don't want to get us too sidetracked, but I appreciate you bringing that up.
Okay, so you wanna take us through the EBF category?
Yep. The last page here, we look at our EL investments, our English learners, and then special education below that. We are finding right now that we have a quickly growing EL community within our school, and some of the staffing recommendations for next year have come to address and be able to better serve that population of students. When we look at special education, we really there's two areas that greatly impact special education. Number one, there are rules put forth that you have to maintain your maintenance of effort, your level of spend at the special education level. From year to year, you're only allowed to have a very small decrease. It's can be a fairly large deal for districts when they don't meet their maintenance of effort. So reducing special education staff is not something that's easily done. The other thing that's not taken into account here is this goes up to grade 12, but we have a large transition program in our district as well for students that go beyond grade 12 and really help them learn life skills into adulthood beyond their senior year of high school. So that drives the staffing numbers up without being able to truly be counted on in the state recommendations.
Any other questions for the group on the EBF?
So I think really just a question out of curiosity, but in the English learners section, so we have one pupil support staff in that area, and the total cost for one FTE is 33,000 for the year. Just seems low. I'm just curious about the compensation level. I guess it seems low, or is that?
If we go to the last page, the one EL pupil support staff. Top of the page.
It's in the category of English learning.
Oh, English training, that's, oh. Okay.
I was wondering if that's a typical salary for that.
I'd have to pull up, right, I don't know if you have the employee list handy, but
Yeah, that's actually an aide position.
yeah.
And I would say of all the information in this document, that line right there is probably the most outdated because as we pull the information for this analysis each year, we have to pick a point in time. So this year it was in October that we pulled the financial data. And then over the winter, we actually approved, or the board approved, some additional positions, which we have since hired. So if we were to pull this information again right now, that FTE number would go up by at least a couple positions as well. We now have a full-time, or not a full-time, but a part-time teacher devoted to ELL, as well as 2 additional aides. And Lori, you can correct me if I'm wrong in this, but I think there was also another part-time position that's in the staffing recommendations for next year in ELL. Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Anything else? I think this is great, I appreciated the information.
Sure. And just so everybody knows, I've emailed everybody the presentation from the board meeting. And if you have questions about the individual slides or what they mean, please feel free to send me an email back or give me a call and I'll be happy to walk you through it.
Our final discussion topic is the financial dashboard. We were tasked with helping contribute thus to a financial dashboard as one of the board's goals. Thank you, Kathleen. She volunteered to work through this with me, so we got together over coffee a while back, and I literally didn't sketch it on a napkin, but I sketched it on a couple pieces of paper, and then went back and tried to draw illustrative examples of kind of what we come up with. Using district data, I labeled them all with a disclaimer at the bottom because I don't want anyone to rely on this or put this up on the webpage. It's kind of a amalgamation of what I could easily lay my hands on, so it's not consistently all the most current fiscal year. The audit, you guys just got the audit, so some of the financial stuff's a little old and so on, but the way I laid this out, I wanted to kind of go, rather than try to mock up a dashboard and us get a little too in the weeds on how it really looks and lays out, I wanted our conversation to be more about, are we capturing all the key data elements that we would want in a community facing dashboard? And kind of go through them one at a time. And then after we hand it off, then the administration can kind of work on how they turn this into a more functioning tool and getting all the current data and so on. So with that, I thought we could just walk through them all, get some feedback. There is sort of a rhyme or reason to how it's all laid out. Yeah, we just kind of go from there. That works for everybody. So the first couple slides are some pie charts for high level informational purposes. Where does the money come from? Where does it go? So the first one is just a revenue breakdown of revenue by source. We kind of, in looking at financial projections over the years, we talked about in the past, we need to look at all the funds together because we were sort of funding capital through the operating dollars and through property taxes. Now, as you're sort of transitioning into this sort of hybrid debt funded model for project 2, that might need to change. So I think one of the sort of open questions is what you include in these. But I think illustratively that it makes sense. That the key point on the first one is just showing how reliant you are on property taxes. And then the next 2 with expenditures, I showed it both by function and object. I think I included all funds in this, and that's what, because capital is a large piece on the right hand side, and salaries and benefits are only 50-some%. So, but again, needing to decide what's the best way to look at that. And I could kind of go either way, or you could show it both ways. And I'll just keep rolling, but if you don't want to chime in on anything specific.
Pause for a quick,
Sure.
and also to step back and just discuss process. So the board goals, one of them was we want to communicate more effectively with the community. And one way to do that is data that's provided through a dashboard. And then the board has broken out into sub-teams for different elements of that. So for example, there's a sub-team that's addressing specifically relating to project 2, what would we want to see in a dashboard? And once again, I point to super most excellent work product from Tony Arbogast, because that sub-team fed Tony some information, and then Tony, with I don't know who, came up with a mock-up. So ultimately, something akin to this would get built into the district website. And I think your path is right, Steve, where just right now it's a question of, all right, what are the charts or data pieces that.
In or out,
things-
thumbs up, thumbs down,
in or out.
path.
Yeah.
And then what I'll do is take this and huddle with my board member partner on this assignment before we then come back to you. And say, okay, we'll do with you what we did with Fred. I get, my quick thing is, I think it is good to provide just basic table setter information, like where does the revenue come from and how's it spent? When you get to feeding it into Tony, I'll probably encourage that we take some of the education jargon out of it, so. Sure. You know, CPRT, you know, we'll make it so, you know, like people can understand.
Kathleen had a comment for me too.
Oh,
okay.
And one thing we may be able to do is because it's never easy to communicate, you know, when you get a large portion of your revenue from something that the state then provides an acronym for. So when the dashboard is complete, we can find a way to put definitions, you know, whether it's in the back or something, just to help explain what the CPPRT is.
Just click on there with a little pop-up or something.
Right, yeah, ideally,
For those of us who don't know what these letters.
yeah, ideally it'll be in some kind of format where you can hover over it, it'll give you some information, or whatever the case may be. So those are some table setters, then we've got comparisons along the same lines, so there's a revenue per pupil comparison, here's that list of peer groups, peer districts. So revenue per pupil, operating expenditures per pupil, comparisons. And then revenues and expenses come together for fund balances, so then we transition to fund balance history. I did a really long one, because I think that's part of the district story. And a lot of the conversation around project 2 was about fund balance and things, so I like this. I could go back to 2007 easily in the forecast 5 data set, so that's what I did. I just mocked up a fake projection one. I think that's actually using the last 5 years of actual data, but just illustratively, I think it makes sense to have the current projections included in there as well.
When we get to translating these, I'm a big fan of expressing fund balance as a percentage of expenditures, because otherwise, just real dollars alone lack context.
Yeah, and you could do that as like a dual axis
Right.
chart with a line on it. That is what I did then on the next one for the comparison. I do have a fund balance percentage there, but I don't show that over time.
Yeah.
But it would be good to see that too, I agree.
How many, so I think it's kind of question about fund balance. So what's gonna be the, are we always gonna go back this many years, like 15 years? You think? I mean, everyone still talks about 13 was so long ago, it's like leave 13 alone. Most of us were like doing something totally different in 2013. I mean, if we could start, it's just an idea, we could start like 16, that's from 16, we've done better. As opposed to going back from 07, and then everyone wants to relive 13 again, why can't we get the fund balance back to 13? You know, and everyone's got a 13 story, except me, of course, but, you know, I was wondering if we could just tone it down in years for the most, because this is 15 years.
Agreed.
And, you know, we should have people in the gallery fighting about 13, and we're just sitting here listening to them for 3 minutes a person, and there's 10 people, and they're talking about 2013. That was 10 years ago. We've already paid off bonds and.
Let's revisit that
Okay.
when we get to
Just
the
like-
property tax slide, because that's another one with the same thing of. Those of us that have lived a lot of this history don't want to forget it necessarily, but there are a lot of people that don't know it, and talking to friends and neighbors,
Right,
they're not invested in all the history that some of us have.
some of them are.
Around and lived over the years, and maybe there's a value in a fresh start. So then we had a fund balance comparison, so again, with most of this, as Kathleen and I kind of talked through it, was we're either looking at a snapshot of where things are now, we're looking at a history over a period of time, or we're looking at that current data compared to the peer districts. So we've hit revenues, expenses, fund balance. One thing that we want to make sure we started looking at, because we haven't really much in the past, is debt, because we haven't had any debt. So I did a quick calc of the peer data on debt capacity utilized. The district's debt capacity is governed by our equalized assessed valuation, it's 6.9% of that value. So I was able to calculate kind of what's everybody's maximum debt and how much they have outstanding currently, so it was interesting to kind of see. So the three districts are all kind of the same spot, that have a fair amount of debt out there, and most of the rest are minimal levels. But that's something that'll change for Rocky Rapids to start borrowing the project too. The one place where I didn't want to make something up from scratch, what I just cut and pasted from Forecast 5 is the financial profile score chart. This is the sort of financial rating system. Again, I went back, I think, as far as it goes, but wouldn't necessarily need to keep it that long of a history. But this takes their scoring system, looks at the revenue versus expenditures, if you know, deficit spending or not, the size of the fund balance percentage, and debt, as well as cash on hand. So I think that's a very solid metric. But if the district's always scoring in 4.0 and in the top category, maybe it's not necessary to include it. And I did do the peer data also. Only one district was that Downers Grove 99 is not in that top category of financial recognition. That's because they got lower fund balances, but that's also because they're in DuPage County and they recognize their taxes, and the time you owe the taxes is different.
I think it's good, Steve, to include the history, even though the number is always about the same.
Yeah.
Because for people who aren't aware of that, that's reassuring and good information to have.
Yeah. And especially if you're looking at a shorter fund balance history where it looks like we're just spending down balance, that gives you some reassurance that we're still at a level that's sufficient to meet the district's needs. Then kind of transition into some of the more detailed areas. Again, thinking about this as a community facing piece, you can't talk about the pure finances without talking about property taxes, the community. So we got some comparative data there. The one is the EAV per pupil, showing that the district has the lowest tax base per student of the peer group. I knew it would be lower, I'm not sure, I knew it was the lowest,
That surprised me also.
which then completely explained why then it's the highest tax rate. It's because you need a higher rate on a lower valuation to generate similar money. We're looking to pay similar salaries and you know, competitive salaries and similar student spending, so you have to have a higher tax rate to do that. And then I asked Brian to send me this chart from the levy presentation. This is one that we've looked at over the years that kind of shows that longer history. To your earlier comment, Cal, you know, do we want to look back to 2012 and talk about the $10 million under levy for 2 years, and some of those things are not. I think this is maybe a school board decision on how much you want to live in the past and continue to pat yourself on the back for I think really good financial decisions or previous board's decisions to levy what was necessary, not levy to the maximum.
Yeah, I was thinking a number of sort of bad metaphors for this. Which I won't share here, but they decide.
You and Tom can talk about
Right.
that.
Yeah,
So that I think that and the fund balance one both, I think there's some conversations that are on how much history you want to include. One that sort of changed as I started working on turning my chicken scratch notes from being able to Kathleen into something I could share here. But we had originally talked about a tax calculator and like put in the value of your home and it'll tell you how much you pay to OPRF and all of that. And then I started looking at my tax bill already shows you that. So you know exactly how much goes to all the taxing bodies. So, but I thought it would be beneficial to at least let people know, you know, roughly what percentage of their bill is going to the high school. And so I quickly looked up all the tax rates, and you know, it depends on if you're in a park or river forest, but it's, you know, 25 to 30% of your bill is coming here versus, you know, the elementary districts and all the other tax departments.
I think this might be too much information. 29 versus 24, people are gonna say, I mean, 29% of their tax bill, people might take this as 29% of something else. You know what I mean? This is. This is.
We're just spitballing.
Okay.
I appreciate that, yeah,
Yes. We should
Yeah.
leave this spitball on the wall.
Why?
I mean, just because people are gonna sit there and gonna say, well, why am I paying more in taxes to OPRF than OPR people? Because they're gonna see 29.2% versus 24.6. That's the first thing someone's gonna think. They're gonna say
true,
why.
even though it's, I'm paying less for my elementary district and less for my village services and.
Exactly, but people are gonna say, okay, we only have a quarter of the population here, it's 3,400 kids, so we got a quarter of the population. Roseville spits out X number of whatever, so we got not the whole population, we're paying more property taxes than everyone else in Park. This is so unfair, and this is gonna lead to all types of tyranny and dumping of tea into Des Plaines River and stuff like that.
Anyone else have thoughts on that?
So, for this exercise was, hey, CFC, what do you think would be some interesting things to put in the dashboard? And realistically, there's only so much we can fit. So this is a great way to take in a bunch of different ideas, and then me and Tom, we're gonna cull this probably. And some of this stuff, I think, the footnotes are gonna be important. So point noted, chances are this probably isn't needed in our dashboard, just because you get it, as you just said.
Everybody
your tax
gets it.
bill. So, yeah, there's only so much we can fit on this thing anyway, so, but right now, this was just the exercise of let's go to the kitchen sink and talk about it.
Great. Did want to include some state funding pieces, so. We came up with looking at the EDF adequacy percentage, so. I'm trying to think how we can translate this to what we looked at earlier. They're sort of, they're related but different ways of looking at the EDF piece, but the bottom line is showing that the district has more than enough resources to deliver that adequate program, and we kind of saw that in all the details that Tony walked us through, that at most of those levels or above in how you're allocating dollars. Whether this history from the beginning is that interesting or not, or kind of where you're at in relation to the peer districts, I'm not sure. We just didn't have much else to say about state funding. It is, go all the way back to the beginning. It's,
I would say with that one.
it's 6% of the budget, so maybe we don't even need to get into the weeds there.
I would say with that one. No one knows, unless you're on the school board, you don't know what you get, is most likely. I mean, there are some people in the town that do know what it is. It wasn't like wrote the law and all that stuff, or Michelle that helped put the law together back in the day, but like. Yeah, you see, that doesn't mean anything. There's also different philosophies.
Right, yeah,
What adequacy means, like some say that equity just means you're adequate. You should be excellent.
I would tend to agree.
Yeah, it just, that's what it seems to us.
Yeah, and all the peer districts are over 100%, which means they're tier 3 or tier 4 in funding, and unless something's changing with that in Springfield, probably not that interesting. And then the last piece we included, and again, this is where you'll decide. This is like on the capital dashboard or here, but I wanted to at least throw out some ideas of historical capital spending on facilities, and then what's projected, and maybe that just takes you to the project 2 site or whatever. But those were all the things that we came up with. At the starting point, you could certainly include some of the stuff that is it what Tony just emailed us to pull in some of that student performance as it relates to finance and the bang for the buck. I mean, that's a great story to tell too.
This was terrific. This is a lot of great ideas. So Tom and I will plow through this and probably maybe use the team as a sounding board for other things, but I think this is exactly what we were hoping to get.
Great. Anything that anybody thinks we missed? I guess we didn't include anything sort of staffing related, I don't know. You know, I think the EBF analysis shows a pretty good job of showing that you're pretty close. Like you said earlier, you're not, it's not an overstaffing, it's a paying people well thing that has you, you know, at higher levels than what the EBF formula would say in a dollar perspective, but you certainly include staffing history, staffing comparisons, and things too.
Yeah, so, you know, we're getting ideas from a few different places. One is the thing that, you know, Tony would put together, another would be the ideas from here, another is some historical things I've used. So I like operating expenditures per pupil, OpEx per pupil on a 5-year annualized basis to show if there's what the trends are. And then long-term debt per student can be a proxy for CapEx. It's another way to express CapEx because, you know, this, if you look at that last slide, I mean, it's like, oh, we've been spending almost nothing on CapEx. All of a sudden, you know, it could beg questions. And then you can isolate out salaries and benefits on a per student basis, which would address the question of, are we overpaying? Are we overstaffed? Okay. So I'll sit down with Tom and we'll try to mix and match the best ideas. I think a lot of good ideas.
In that area, sorry.
Oh, good.
I was just gonna say, I think in that area, if we're talking about, you know, communication with the community sees that area as a bit of a red flag. So I think it'd be good for, us to like, you know, be able to like, you know, calm their fears and it's not, you know, going that way, right? Cause it's priority that it's being managed well and that, you know, we have our arms around how it's being managed.
That's a
Because
real,
you're saying we pay our teachers, you know, the best that we can. We all want to do that, but you know, we can't always allow it to escalate, right? That, you know, the money's just there. It's just not there. I mean, you know.
right, and
So
that's.
it's a big concern, you know, for the community.
And that's a great point because, and this is part of the reason that having peer districts really benefits us. Because what we need to be able to tell the community, we do not overpay quote unquote for talent, but we do pay competitive salaries in order to attract the best teachers to want to come to work. So we got to walk that in line. The other point you're making is also about this history because, yeah, there's a problematic history dating back to the early 2000s. Now, it is my goal, you know, you may be stepping down as the chairperson, but you're staying on the committee, I'm sure.
That's the
Okay. So it is my goal that within the next 2 or 3 years, the board working together with you, we can move on to kind of a new chapter where we're no longer having to apologize or explain away some of the potential missteps that past boards may have made, but rather through this dashboard, we can bring a positive forward-looking story to the community that combines both the data in this dashboard, but also the footnoting and the sidebarring of kind of the rules of the road by which we operate. It's the thesis that we will pay competitively, but we will not overpay. And it's other things like stating, well, we have established a new boundary condition for our fund balance, which is 25 to 50%. And to say that, and it's codified in policy, and it is actually a pretty lean and mean policy governing expenditures as a percentage of fund balance. We need to bring all these elements together so we can kind of finally put to rest some of the turbulence of the 2010s.
Sounds great. We're glad to be part of it.
Thank you.
And I think it would be easy to pull, you know, right from the school report card, you could get average salary data, average class size data, and things like that.
Teacher retention. Teacher retention or salary, so.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a good support, that supports the salary. If
Yeah,
nobody's
and-
quitting, that supports the salary.
That's right, because even though we're talking about financial metrics, we still need to tie them to how we're serving students. And you're right, it's retaining teachers and then also using that academic performance also relative to our peers. We gotta tell that comprehensive story.
Any other thoughts, anything else that we haven't covered?
Not dashboard related, but the audit presentation may have taken a little bit longer than it would have. But I didn't know this necessarily at the time when we planned, but just some positive news to share with the CFC. We have finished reviewing all the bids for project 2, and there was out of the 80.6 million in total bid packages that went out for budget. We came in at $79.4 million. So we are slightly under budget right now with our bids. So just excited to share that, and felt with the dollars and how heavily involved CFC was in planning and preparing for project 2 that wanted to throw that in since we had a minute. So
Great, thank you. Tony or Graham, can you remind me sort of what the timetable was for the dashboard and I forget, I don't think we have another meeting till May. June, so I think your deadline was much earlier than that, so I don't know how you want to engage with us as you continue having conversations on your end.
I'd have to quickly pull up what we,
I believe it's May of this year, but I can pull it up in 2 seconds here.
Okay.
I was saying it was earlier than that, it was April, end of April, so if you were.
Yeah, your eyes are bigger than your stomach and you think all this stuff's gonna happen. I would say this, in terms of getting the critical input from CFC, we succeeded in getting that. And I think what we might do is just on an ad hoc basis, maybe bounce a few follow-up questions or ideas to folks, but I don't think
Your new chair will be glad to have things bounced off.
we're not constrained in any way by the fact that our next meeting is in May.
Great. And completion, the goal was to have CFC provide input March of 24 and then completion May of 24. So
we can see it in June, the June meeting.
Yes, administration will end up doing the heavy lifting, I think yes, but Tony, you can tell us if that's not right.
no, that a lot of this is should be once we know can't think of a better way to say this. Once we know where our goalposts are, we know how to kick the field goal. So we'll be able to put this together for everybody. And the nice thing is, and what Steve has put together is Brian and myself are very familiar with all of these charts. So yeah, I think we can make something that looks nice and interacts well, and we'll bring it live and continue to improve it based on feedback.
Sounds good. Anything else for the group before we adjourn?
Oh, I do have something. So Tom Kofsky, back in January, this is like an item proposal for next meeting. Tom Kofsky, back in January, he sent us a note observing that in 2021, we seem to deviate from past practices in making some investments, cash. And then as interest rates rose, unfortunately, our cash holdings didn't enjoy that rising tide. So I think if I could just ask to put on the May meeting agenda, the topic of district investment strategy and policy.
Sounds good. I don't have my notes from the start of the year when we said what we might be talking about in May. But I'll pass that on to Greg. We need to build an agenda for the May meetings.
Well, and what I can do.
June, sorry.
Thank you.
June meeting.
Thank you.
what I can do is forward you this email correspondence I'm talking about.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Folks,
I'll second. All in favor?
aye.
Aye.